Call the meeting to order of our joint oversight hearing. We have the Senate Transportation and Housing Committee and our colleagues from the Senator West Coast Committee, the Energy, Utilities, and Communications Committee. So we'd like to start the meeting. Senator, comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to kick off kind of the content of the meeting. As many of you know, as many of you have been informed today, we are considering California's retail gasoline markets and the susceptibility to price spikes following supply disruptions, both planned and unplanned. This is not the first of these, the first time these committees have considered such questions. Most recently in 1999, the committees convened to explore the causes of what at the time were record high retail gasoline prices, over $2 a gallon back in 2000. I'm sorry, 1999. If any of you can remember paying $2 for gasoline, that was really the last time we convened here in the Senate to talk about such a subject. Today, we saw gas prices decline and then spike up yet again. We had a brief period of low gas prices that approached near $2 a gallon. And a lot of the explanations that we heard that the results in the price increases have been because of February 18 refinery explosion at an ExxonMobil refinery. We had an oversight hearing on the subject on March 5th, and it was conducted by the Committee on Energy and the Senate Committee on Environmental Quality, chaired by Senator Wachowski. Gasoline prices at some locations shot up 25 cents overnight. The question is that really necessary? And was that really necessary just hours after the explosion? Within a week, California's average retail gasoline prices have risen 37.2 cents. Since the incident, U.S. Energy Information described that situation as the largest week-to-week increase since the agency began monitoring West Coast prices in 1992. More generally, average gasoline prices in California are currently roughly $1 more per gallon than they are in the rest of the country. It is true that Californians do pay a premium for their cleaner burning gasoline, but current prices are well beyond the 20 or 30 cents more that Californians pay typically. So we're interested in knowing if we're only paying about 20 or 30 cents typically, why is it translating to a whole dollar more in gas prices? You know, we have seen the benefits to our state in changing over to a cleaner burning gas. And while we have this policy that deals with, a different formula during incidences where we may see more contamination, it has definitely had benefits to Californians. We don't want to go without saying that because of this new formula, the ARB has done studies that suggest that the cleaner burning fuels result in removing 3.5 million vehicles from our roads, the equivalent of, although not removing the vehicles, or removing the contamination that would have been posed by those vehicles, and reducing emissions to motor vehicles by 15%, and reducing cancer risk from vehicle emissions by 40%. These are significant benefits to Californians that we all enjoy because we try to find a better way to reduce emissions to our environment. But that does not justify the extra 80 cents to 70 cents additional that people pay in the pump. And we want to know if that's just, an unjust element that's worked into kind of the free market model. Others point to a lack of reserves and market control exerted by a small universe of suppliers. Do we have monopolies on fuel in California? We want to ask those questions today we want to know if we don't have a competitive enough market in California to keep prices low.
Thank you.
You want to begin?
Thank you, Chair Wesso. And last week, my committee, which is the Transportation and Housing Committee, and the Environmental Quality Committee, heard about some of the many transportation programs and policies we have to clean up our air and deal with climate change. Supporting alternative fuel vehicles, cleaner fuels, more efficient vehicles, expanding and improving transit, reducing vehicle miles traveled, are all components of this strategy. And we're beginning to reduce our reliance on gasoline on our way to the goal of reducing petroleum use by 50%. And in doing so, we are also helping to reduce the effect of gasoline price spikes on our citizens and the economy. But of course, today, the great majority of our transportation activities rely on gasoline. That's what's happening. And that'll be the case for many years to come. So we got to ensure that our markets are functioning properly and provide us with a reliable and fairly priced supply of gasoline. Recent events have raised questions about how well the market is functioning, as California gasoline prices have become much higher than the prices around the rest of the country. Some have observed that California is an island, that our gasoline supply is unique in this country. But while California may be an island, it's a pretty big one. And California is the third largest transportation fuel market in the world, which means that California's market is larger than any country except for the United States and China. And how can such a well-functioning market be subject to such volatile prices? Now, that's what we hope to learn today. So we'll start our hearing. We'd like to invite, as an overview and background, Jania Scott, from the California Energy Commission. Welcome again. She was in our hearing last week. And Gordon Shrimp from the Senior Fuel Specialist from the Energy Commission. So first we'll hear from the Energy Commission. And thank you for, you may begin your presentation, Jania. Thank you.
Is this on? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good afternoon, Chair Bell, Chair Wesso, and members. It's good to be here in front of you all again so soon. Thank you so much for inviting the California Energy Commission here today to speak on the important topic of gas prices and markets. The Energy Commission has a long history of collecting data and providing objective, expert analysis for the state on energy system trends, including transportation fuel markets and infrastructure. I assure you that you are in very good hands today with our senior analyst, Gordon Shrimp, here, who will provide an overview of what is going on in California gas market today, how it compares nationally, and how it compares with trends over time. Before Gordon begins, though, as the lead commissioner on transportation at the Energy Commission, I wanted to provide the committee with some broader context on the multiple angles that the Energy Commission is working on, both to track and also to provide, both to track what's going on in the conventional fuel market, but also to provide alternatives to the challenges of petroleum fuel price volatility. Last September, the Energy Commission created the Petroleum Market Advisory Committee, made up of 5 leading energy economists and market experts. The purpose of the committee is to provide expert advice and insight to the Commission on the factors and conditions related to the oil price fluctuations and spikes, and what the potential impacts to consumers are. The committee has met twice already, in December and in February, and they focused on reviewing the availability of data on California's petroleum markets and discussing the market effects of the recent inclusion of fossil fuels under the cap and trade program. As the public member of the Energy Commission, I just wanted to note also that these meetings that the Petroleum Market Advisory Committee holds were noticed, and they're open to the public, and they will continue to be so. Looking ahead, the Commission envisions that the Petroleum Market Advisory Committee will be a standing expert resource that we can activate as needed when local or global events take place or anticipated changes in state or federal policies may affect gas prices outside of normal trends. In addition to creating this body, the Commission is also continuing to support the development of alternative fuels and infrastructure in the state, which help us to be less reliant on a volatile gas market and support the governor's State of the State goals to reduce petroleum use by up to 50%. I provided a briefing to you last Tuesday, as Chair Bell mentioned, on our alternative and renewable fuel and vehicle technology program. And the takeaway from that is that the Energy Commission has a diverse portfolio of about $500 million invested in over 470 projects around the state, including 44 low-carbon biofuel projects that have a new production capacity of over 145 million gallons per year, as well as investments in electric charging and hydrogen fueling infrastructure for vehicles that will use non-petroleum-based fuels like electricity and hydrogen. So I wanted to say thank you again for inviting the Energy Commission to be part of this important discussion. And with that, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Gordon Shrimp, who will provide you with the details on what is going on in the California gas market today.
Thank you, Commissioner Scott. Thank you, Senators, for the opportunity to be here today to explain what has been going on in California's gasoline market. I intend to cover some history on what prices have been doing in California and talk about why prices do fluctuate with volatility, but more importantly, what are some of the primary factors we believe are responsible for the recent price spike we have seen in California during 2015. And I'll talk about what is the breakdown in gasoline prices. There are taxes, there are margins, there's the cost of crude oil in there. So those are important factors to examine when there is a rapid increase in price. And I'll talk about, and then I'll just conclude my remarks.
Okay.
So we all know that California gasoline prices are more expensive. They are some of the most expensive gasoline prices in the United States, usually only second to places like Hawaii. A lot of that has to do with a higher tax burden on the gallon of gasoline. It's about 15 cents more than the average in the United States, so that's part of the reason why gasoline prices are consistently more expensive than the rest of the United States. We also have a higher production cost, as was mentioned at the outset here. Clean burning gasoline regulations cost between 5 and 15 cents a gallon, so that's an average of about 10 cents. Most recently, not historically why prices have been higher, but most recently is the new obligation, fuels under the cap, the carbon cost obligation by fuel providers downstream of the refineries, and that's been consistently about 10 cents a gallon so far this year. And then more recently, what we see when we have price spikes are an elevated price for a longer period of time, could be several weeks or a couple of months because of a price spike, and that does add to the overall cost. So if you see what some of the average prices are, it's about 17 cents and 12 cents, and I'll go to the next slide. I'm sorry. Let's back up. Well, I think I jumped ahead here.
Yeah, there we go.
So my apologies. Let's just finish up on that thought. So here's where the prices are more expensive, and these are the annual averages in green bars. And you see the much higher bar is so far through March 23rd. And that is a consequence of this very strong price spike that has brought the overall price in gasoline in California above and beyond what it may normally be. So I'll just back up if I may. The isolated nature of California does not prevent gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel from being brought into California. But what it does mean is if there is a significant unplanned outage, it takes time to bring in supplies from outside of the area. The reason is there are no pipelines connecting California to outside sources of supply, so it must be by marine vessel. That's several days to a week from the Pacific Northwest, and much longer from foreign sources in the U.S. Gulf Coast. So when there is a problem, supplies need to be brought from outside, prices will rise rapidly because you can't bring in supplies immediately. So let's talk about some of the factors. We all know that crude oil is the main driver to why prices go up and down. Consumers were enjoying relatively low prices. They dropped over $1.10 in California over a period of 6 months with a collapse in global and domestic crude oil prices. So prices of crude go up, go down. That's the primary driver for gasoline. But there are some other factors that are very important when looking at why prices will change in a very short period of time. other than crude oil changes in price. And so this chart is this slide is supposed to show you red arrows going up. Those are factors that can increase prices relative to normal. And then we have some other factors on there that can go either way, depending on if it's upward or downward. And then finally, we have some reductions in price that, as a consequence of when refineries turn to service. So these are the kinds of factors we examine at the Energy Commission and monitor day in and day out when we look at the California gasoline market. And so we keep an eye on some of those important factors. And probably the most critical ones are refinery operations. Are they operating normally? Do they have an unplanned outage? Because planned maintenance is not necessarily a problem because refiners bring in additional supplies of gasoline, build up their inventory levels, and then work on some process units and are still able to produce gasoline by using those stored up blending components or recipes or ingredients to make gasoline. So that's not the problem. The problem is when something unexpected happens, their supply department did not plan for that and must cover their obligations. We also know, besides having very high prices in California, the price seems to go up every spring, almost without exception. That is true. As this graphic illustrates, it has since 2011 gone up at least 60 cents a gallon, and most recently 76, and that's been in line with what happened in 2012. So there is a rapid price increase. Part of that has to do with a change in the gasoline recipe. We have a recipe, winter, summer gasoline in California, other places in the United States for air quality purposes. The ingredients change in the summer to reduce emissions, and as a consequence, refiners are unable to produce as much gasoline from processing 1 barrel of crude oil, about 5 to 8% reduction in production capability. That in and of itself will increase prices anywhere in the order of 20 to 30 cents during any particular season, just for that reason alone. We also have a rise in demand from January, the lowest point of gasoline demand, to May. That increase can be about 11, 12, or even 13% of a demand increase over that short period of time. And just to note, we're not alone with seasonal price increases because of this switch from winter to summer gasoline. Most recently, in the Illinois market, prices increased over 20 cents in a period of 3 days. This happened from the 18th of March through the 22nd. So that was as a consequence of their switch from winter to summer gasoline. So why do prices increase when there's a significant unplanned outage? If you think of it from the perspective of the producer, refiners in California, what they produce, about 80 to 95% of that is under contractual obligation to supply. They have people that depend on that supply. They go to, among other, 60 distribution terminals to pick up that supply. And they get their gasoline regardless of what happens at the refinery. And so what a refiner has to do when they have an unplanned outage is cover those contractual obligations. So how do they do that? Two main approaches. They use their own inventories of gasoline, which I'll talk about in just a minute, and they draw those down to continue making gasoline. They also buy from everybody else they can locally, other refiners and other traders who are storing gasoline as a strategic stock to sell to refiners during an unplanned outage, at a higher price, of course. So they will pay almost anything to make sure their contractual obligations continue to be met for a short period of time. If they believe the incident is going to put them temporarily out of business of making gasoline for longer than a couple of weeks or days, they have to look further afield because that allows additional time for imports to be brought in from outside the state. That is what's happening now. ExxonMobil looking further afield to bring in supplies because they know their gasoline producing equipment won't be back anytime soon. So have we had significant increases in 1 week? Yes, we have. And these are actually the highest price spikes we've had over a week period of time. And you see some of the colors on here. The one we've had just now is the second highest compared to 2012, and is the second of all of these price spikes on this list that occurred in 2015. What's also interesting to note is there are various reasons you can have a price spike. A hurricane in the Gulf Coast can increase prices in California. How could that be? Our wholesale prices at the refinery level are tied to the futures market for gasoline. So if the NYMEX futures contract goes up, our gasoline prices at the refinery level go up, along with all other refining centers in the United States. So that is why our prices increased during Hurricane Katrina. We also had a pipeline outage in Tucson that increased our prices. We've had a seasonal increase. You see the green bar there that increased prices rapidly. So there are a variety of factors, but normally it's a significant unplanned refinery outage. So what did happen with prices? So this chart is meant to show you the retail prices on top on a daily basis, the wholesale refinery prices below that, along with distribution terminal, what we call a rack price, and on the very bottom, crude oil. So as you can see, the crude oil price didn't really change that much, dropped a little bit, so has no responsibility whatsoever for this rise, this rapid price spike increase. So what does come into play are two significant refinery events. Tesoro Golden Eagle is unable to restart their operations. Half the refinery was under planned maintenance. They're about to start, and they were hit by a refinery strike. Nationwide strike that affected about a fifth of the refining capacity, but they were the only refinery who was unable to continue operating when striking workers left the facility. The reason is they couldn't bring back the refinery without those experienced workers. That was the exception. So that tightened supply, prices started to rise. We had a switch over from winter to summer gasoline beginning the first and second week of February, and then we had the ExxonMobil explosion February 18. Now we have 17.6% of the refining capacity offline in California. Very significant, and both of those entities are seeking alternative sources of supply to meet their obligations. And as you can see here now, the refinery price spike is over at the refinery level, the distribution terminal level, as well as the retail level. Although, title of this hearing, up like a rocket, down like a feather, that is what is happening with the retail prices now. This breaks down the various components in a gallon of gasoline at 4 discrete points in time, right before 2013 and right before Tesoro Golden Eagle was hit by the strike, the day before the incident at ExxonMobil, and then you see near the price spike, this is a Monday price of March 9th, the highest level there, and then most recently, yesterday. Now, what's interesting to note is we have a new component to retail gasoline, and that's the fuels under the cap, the 10 cents a gallon there, which was after the first of the year. So once again, nothing to do with this price spike, that particular obligation on AB 32. So what typically happens when wholesale prices go up rapidly, the dealers see less margin temporarily, and then they start to recover, and after wholesale prices drop for them, they try to recover some of those lost costs. So that's why their margin shrinks and then expands. And it should be noted that when it goes up, obviously, the refiner's margin goes up. Are there costs and profits in that margin? Yes. Did their cost change when prices rose for the ones who didn't have a problem? No, they did not. So they are earning additional rents in the marketplace because they're operating and selling into the marketplace at much higher prices. And that is one of the reasons, from what we understand, the refinery managers are judged on how well the refinery operates, meaning not having unplanned outages, because when one does happen, it's very profitable for the other refineries to continue operating at sustained levels to supply fuels into the marketplace. So what do we look for this particular 2015 price spike? There are certainly some, you'd say, some culprits here. Unplanned refinery closure, certainly, that box is checked. Tesoro Golden Eagle did not come back as scheduled on February 1st, is still down, and then switched to summer gasoline and lower than normal inventories. So I've already covered this, the strike. I think the two takeaways here are the significant portion of refining capacity in California and the fact that this refinery will come back soon to operations, and that will be good news for supply of gasoline and will be good news for consumers, hopefully within the next week to week and a half. The ExxonMobil facility experienced damage to an air pollution control device, a very large device, 12 stories tall, electrostatic precipitator, controls emissions from gasoline-producing units. Those units are still shut down while the investigation continues. That facility, that pollution control device is significantly damaged, will take a long time to repair. And the company, from what we read, is looking at bringing back an older pollution control device and restarting those gasoline producing units, albeit at lower levels, because you can't operate them at full levels because that older pollution control device is not suited to get emissions low enough, which is why it was replaced in 2008, 2009. So it's good news that that refinery will come back, but it's indeterminate exactly when, longer time horizon, but hopefully sometime early this summer. So inventory levels are important. Why? They don't cause a price spike per se, but if inventory levels are low, then inventory holders take greater risk to sell to others if they themselves have a problem. So inventory levels are important, and so if you can see by this chart, 2015 inventory levels for gasoline are lower than they were in 2014 and 2013, and continue to decline because these two refineries remain offline. This is over a longer period of time, and this is a 5-year high-low band, and we're seeing consistently low inventory levels. And you see when the Tesoro Golden Eagle incident occurred from that arrow, inventory levels continue to decline as those inventories were used to create more gasoline. So you've been reading about inventory levels in California, I think was mentioned earlier, are low. They're much lower than the United States. If one looks at the Energy Information Administration data for gasoline inventories and divides them by demand or production demand, you get these sort of days of supply calculations. As you can see by this comparative, double that of California. Well, the problem is that data is for all inventories throughout the United States, not just refineries. Our data on our website is for refinery inventory levels only. We do not include bulk storage inventory holdings, nor what is in pipelines, pipeline fill. EIA does. So if you do a deeper dive into the EIA data, you can see that just look at refinery inventory levels, sort of an apples and apples instead of an apples and orange comparison. And what do you see? A significant degree of variability between one region and another. So the yellow highest bars, lots of storage, days of supply, is where? U.S. Gulf Coast. Greatest refining capacity in the United States, and they produce well over 3 times as much gasoline as they consume locally. It's exported upper Midwest, East Coast, Florida, so they're a very important source of supply. The small yellow bar, only 2 to 3 days of inventory at those refineries, you think, wow, that's hardly any. That's right, because there are hardly any refineries in PADD 1, which is what? Eastern United States. They are a huge importer of gasoline. That's where they get their supply from, mainly. Supply from the Gulf Coast, foreign refineries, and those inventory levels at bulk plants are very high for days of supply. So, but at the refinery level, it's different. So in California, we're kind of one of the higher places. We're in balance in California. We don't usually need imports. And so our inventory levels seem to be nothing out of the ordinary and seem to be appropriately high for our type of a balanced market, not a huge net exporter and not a huge net importer. And production. 17.6% of refining capacity offline, and yet production seems to be as high. How can that be? Because I'm creating gasoline by blend stocks together. I have an inventory and I purchase from other people. And I import it in as well from the Pacific Northwest. So that's how I still make gasoline without processing crude oil. This is akin to what happened in August of 2012, Chevron Richmond crude oil unit fire. You all remember that? That was the highest gasoline prices in California that year in October. That refinery didn't process a drop of crude oil after that incident into the following year. Yet, gasoline production was quite robust in California. How could it possibly do that? Because it was purchasing feedstock, gas oils, that were used to feed to the gasoline processing units to make gasoline without processing any crude oil. That's how they were able to do that. This time, ExxonMobil's gasoline processing units are the ones that can't be operated right now. And so they can't purchase feedstocks and run through those units because they need that air pollution control device repaired. So in conclusion, just want to cover, I won't go back over my, my main points, but what I do want to tell you is the final bullet at the bottom here, the arrival of 1.7 million barrels of gasoline. I did not cover that yet. This is what a company can do to acquire additional supplies to meet their contractual obligations if they know they're going to be down for longer than a couple of weeks. So we read that there's between 7, 8, 9 marine vessels bringing in gasoline from foreign sources that are going to be arriving within the next week and a half to 2 weeks into California. That will also help with supply and help put downward pressure on prices. I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.